Okay, let's talk through AWS cloud economics and some of the fundamental unique items about the cloud. Well, first, the pricing itself is driven by three main things. The first is compute. So this would be, let's say, Amazon EC2 or a virtualized instance, or it could be, let's say, EMR, which is hosted Spark or Hadoop, or it could be anything like an AWS Lambda. So this ability to actually crunch through things and process them, that's going to be a big driver of what a cost is going to add up to on the cloud. Storage as well. So are you storing 1 terabyte of data? Are you using disk IO? So storage is a big driver. And then also outbound data. So did you do a bunch of processing and that was costly, and then finally did you go through and move that data to, let's say, a different cloud or to your own physical data center? That's going to cost money. So these are the three most important things to be aware of in terms of cost. Also, the charge for aggregated outbound data transfer is also something to consider as well. So what about services with no charge? A few of those are going to be these essentially glue type services. One of them is the Amazon VPC, or the virtual private cloud. So this is this kind of firewalled off cloud. They provide that for free. The security of the identity and access management system, which allows you to have users and groups and roles, those are part of what Amazon itself provides to you, and you get that for free. The billing system, the deployment mechanism around Elastic Beanstalk, infrastructure as code, which is CloudFormation, automatic scaling, and OpsWorks. So a lot of these kind of embedded services that help you spin up EC2 or help you create storage, they are actually free because they facilitate the operation of the cloud. And let's talk about some pricing philosophy here. In general, on AWS, you're only going to need to pay for what you use. And so again, just like the utility company, if you don't want to have high costs, you can just decrease your usage of, let's say, CPU. And you can spin down machines, and then you don't have to pay for those resources. You also are able to actually buy in bulk. So imagine Costco as this analogy, or let's say Walgreens, or some large store. You can buy in bulk and you can save money because you bought a huge quantity of some service. You can do the same thing with the cloud. You can purchase CPU and rent it basically for a whole year and say, I'm going to buy this capacity, or the same with storage or database systems. Finally, you can actually decide that you want to scale up and scale down on your own. And this is a way that you can actually change and lower your cost structure. So in a way, what it is it's a skill-based penalty. So if you have high skill, then you're going to pay less for the cloud because you have the ability to make your system elastic, right? So you can scale up and scale down. But if you have lower skill, you're going to pay a lot more. So it's a way of subsidizing the cloud for other people. And then another thing that Amazon does that's similar again to companies like Walmart or Costco is that it's constantly making the price go down for things. So every time they figure out a way to save money and they're constantly trying to make things more efficient, they'll lower the price. And so the reason they do that is they're constantly putting pressure on their competition, and then they're passing that savings down to you. Now let's talk about how this pay for what you use philosophy actually works in practice. What this means is that you're incentivized to really have an efficient use of services. And so this is one of the reasons why they have created the system like that. And also, if you have the skill to do this, you can actually really have very low cost because you're able to actually correctly configure it. So it's a lot like a house where if you have the right insulation, you have the right material, that you can have very low energy costs and you don't have to constantly run your air conditioner or your heater because you've been able to efficiently keep track of the energy costs of your house. And what this does is it makes you, as the user of the cloud, focused on building the software product, right? You're not focused on buying hardware and hiring workers that can maintain that hardware. You're focused on building the best product that you can. And so this has really been a big driver for startups in the Bay Area, is that they can focus on their product, not focus on things that aren't making them different from their competitors. Another thing you can do in terms of pricing with AWS is you can pay for this reserved capacity. And so you can save up to 75% of your costs by knowing how much capacity you're going to use and then buying it up front. So buying, let's say, a 3-year contract for the amount of servers that you need. So if you know exactly the kind of workloads you're going to run, this could be an incredible savings. So they incentivize this kind of behavior. And there's 3 types of reserved instances, and these are important to know about. There's all upfront reserved instance, and that would be like this example where I'm going to pay for the whole thing all up front, and now I only have to pay 25% of the cost because I'm going to buy it for the next 3 years. There's partial upfront reserved instance, and that would be, let's say you're going to purchase a 3-year contract, but you only pay for the first year upfront, and then there's an incremental cost after that. And then there's also no upfront payment reserved instances. So you could say, I still want to reserve it for 3 years, and I want to get some cost savings, but I'd rather pay a slightly higher cost so that I don't have to put any of my own money up front. You also can, again, scale up and scale down, depending on how much you want to use the service, and your savings will actually increase as the usage increases. So let's say you start to put, let's say, 10 terabytes of data onto the cloud. You would pay let's just say you pay 1 cent per gigabyte, and then maybe if you go up to 100 terabytes, you could only be charged 0.05 cents per gigabyte. So you're incentivized to put more data because they'll give you more of a saving. And also, this is how this tiered pricing comes in. So we could call this, for example, the first tier here, and the other one is going to be tier 2. And then also they incentivize you to use the cloud because they let you ingest the data for free, but getting it out is what they would actually not subsidize. So they're going to subsidize you to get the data into their cloud. Again, talked about this earlier, but the continuous price drops here. AWS is focused on constantly lowering the price, and the reason why they're doing that is that they want to constantly compete with other cloud providers and ensure that you're going to have the best experience with their cloud, and they pass on those savings to you. So again, going to Costco, buying a whole case full of water, I can save a lot of money because they're able to use their purchasing power to give me a savings. And then that's why I go there, because I have a lower cost. And in addition to the cost savings, they're also constantly updating the hardware. So maybe there's a clock cycle of 2.4, and then it goes over to 2.6, and then it goes to 2.8. I'm not going to be charged more money. That is automatically going to come for free as part of the continuous improvement. Or let's say moving from solid state from a physical disk that spins to a solid state disk. These are all kinds of things that I'm going to get for free as part of the continuous improvements in the cloud. Now, in terms of the pricing contract details, AWS is focused on lowering costs. So that's really the most important thing to be aware of. And so as a result of that, you're not going to have to get a contract. It's optional. So you're not forced to get a contract, but you can get a contract. And also because they're passing on these savings to the customers as well, you can think about deciding when you want to actually use those resources and when you don't want to use those resources. So you have that capability. Another thing to be aware of in terms of the AWS cloud is this concept of total cost of ownership. What does that mean? Well, what it means is that you're able to calculate both the direct and the indirect costs. And so this is really something like the purchase price and the operational cost. So let's take a car, for example. In the past, I had a Land Rover, which is a type of four-wheel drive vehicle. The purchase price, let's just say it's $20,000. I got it used, but then the maintenance cost was almost as much as that because it was constantly breaking down. So that's the operational cost, and so it's beyond just what you pay for something. It's how much does it cost to maintain that system, and that's what total cost of ownership is all about, and why it's important to think about that in terms of the physical data center versus the cloud. And this is really a better metric than just thinking about the purchase price. Again, if you take the Land Rover, for example, over the course of, let's say, 5 years, it could cost the total cost of ownership could be $40,000. So even though it felt like it was a deal to get it at $20,000, and I could have maybe bought a different car for $30,000, that other car, let's say it's a Honda, maybe because it never breaks down, never has any problems, that's actually lower. The $30,000 car is lower than the $20,000 car because it never has to have huge expensive maintenance bills. And so the same thing applies with the cloud. So if you think about this concept of on-premise versus the cloud here, this is where you really get into these ownership issues. So let's take a on-prem instance here, right? So if we go to on-prem, what is it you're going to have to be aware of? You're going to have to buy equipment, right? So we can put in equipment here. You're going to have to hire people to maintain that equipment, and workers are very expensive, and you're going to have to find them. Maybe you can't even find them. And then you're also going to have to worry about contracts as well. So maybe you have to get internet contracts, and then also there's literally the cost of buying the equipment itself, right? So you have all these different things you have to worry about, but with something like the cloud, it gets simplified into you just have a resource and you rent it for 1 hour and you don't worry about it. Again, very similar to like a car rental. One of the ways that you can get into this into more detail, and this is something I'd recommend you look at on your own, if you go to http calculator.s3 Amazon AWS, there's a monthly calculator that will help you calculate the cost that it would be involved in running AWS. And so this allows you to do things like you can estimate, for example, your monthly burn for AWS. You can also look at templates that show similar kinds of setups that you have. Let's say it's a web-based setup or a mobile-based company, and you can see what it would typically cost. And then another one to be aware of is this total cost of ownership calculator, and this allows you to figure out things like what's your cost savings, for example, from a physical data center. You can make detailed reports, and also you can go through and you can do like a what if scenario as well. So this would be if you were going to talk to a company that was thinking of moving to the cloud, you could go through and tell them to go to AWS tcocalculator.com and look at these different scenarios and figure out if this is really if they're totally calculating the cost, or they're just only looking at a very small component of the cost. Some other additional total cost of ownership considerations as well is that you can, in fact, reduce the personnel in your company because you don't need to hire these specialized workers. And in fact, they're most likely not going to be at the same level as the workers you would get from the cloud, because the workers that Amazon's going to hire are going to be the best of the best. Also, the developers in your company are going to have much more increased productivity because they're focused, again, on making your product better. They're not focused on doing things that are outside of their area of expertise, like maintaining servers. And then finally, this is another big one, is backups and disaster recovery. So if you have to purchase those systems and maintain those systems yourself, that could be extremely expensive and time consuming. And these are things that you don't have to really be an expert on. You can just use the off-the-shelf services for the cloud. So really, in summary, there's many different ways that the cloud saves companies money, and especially when you get into things like total cost of ownership, it's a much better deal for the majority of companies that are building software.